start with an article that I read.
Okay.
It's a very good article. I just read it this morning, actually. It's on Astral Codex 10, which is a rationalist guy who a lot of people in San Francisco like to read. And it's a very good article because I'm going to spoil it for the people out there. I still recommend you read it, but I'll ruin the effect. He tells a story in 3 different sections. And in each section, he starts it with saying, did you believe that? Because I did, and then I researched further, and that turned out not to be the case. So it starts, it's like, the first story is that hospitals, which made its round, hospitals are turning down people in Oklahoma because so many people are in there with ivermectin that gunshot victims can't be treated. And then the next section is, did you believe that? Because then I looked into it, and actually, the doctor that did that doesn't, like one hospital came out and said that, no, that guy doesn't even really work here, and that's not true. And then I was like, yep, totally makes sense.
Sorry, what was the claim? That
the
people
claim
with
was
ivermectin were...
A doctor from Oklahoma said that people in Oklahoma were being turned down, gunshot victims, because the beds were full with ivermectin overdoses and COVID and that kind of stuff. So people were bleeding and not able to get a hospital bed. And I was like, did you believe that? That's not true. This hospital came out and said, that guy doesn't even work here. That's not the case. Oh. Then he goes on to do another section. He goes, did you believe that? Because that's not true. Because this is a doctor who works at several different hospitals. And sure, maybe he wasn't at this particular one, but he's got 6 other that if you just go to his LinkedIn that he's active on or something like that. And then even after that, he goes, did you believe that? Because that's not true. And he's like, and just to be clear, I haven't called a single one of these hospitals, but this is all just from Google searching. What I found is apparently, and I don't even, and now I think the point of the article is don't even take this to be true. Yeah. This is a tentative story, that this doctor went on a podcast, said that hospitals were filling up. In a later sentence said that people were using ivermectin and case rates were going up, and mentioned that people were not able to get care because of the full hospital beds. At some point, that got morphed and was picked up by Rolling Stone, the BBC, The Guardian, into doctor says that hospital beds are filling up. And I think the point of the article is to point out not just the bias of the other side, but as you read it, you sense, and I sensed, where I was pleased with it. I was like, that makes sense. The news is full of shit.
Yeah.
It's but that's not the whole story. Not only is the news and still the news is totally full of shit by the end of it, any way you slice and dice it. But I suppose more fundamentally, people are full of shit. That it doesn't even require a grand conspiracy. That it just one person to adjust a headline based on something they heard from a doctor who might have been using shorthand can then get picked up completely without research by the BBC, The Guardian, all of these things that we take to be serious, and get reprinted. And I just reflecting myself, the question that I had for myself is, why, for God's sake, do I still involve myself in reading anything? Which I think is the most interesting question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why? Do you ever read anything?
No.
You got to read some things. Because you'll come to me dude, did you hear?
Sometimes I'll check Reddit.
Yeah.
But
so that's the question. Why? If it is to be understood that my ability to trust that this corresponds to a real thing is approximately 0 for 100 different reasons. And this isn't as fun as Game of Thrones, which I understand isn't real, but it's just way more cool. I'd rather know the history of the houses in Game of Thrones because that's exciting.
Why do you?
Why in God's name?
Well, how do you find it? What's your source? Because I know you're not watching CNN.
Well, even this particular thing, Astral Codex 10, and I think he did a good job in this article of why do I read this thing? Because sometimes I walk away with political takes or, takes, influence perspectives of reality based on claims that I'm not checking that he makes.
Well, I would guess you read Astral Codex 10 because you think that's the best way to get, quote unquote, the real story.
Yes.
Right? I think your idea is that the news is all fake, but him and the last psychiatrist have the ability to cut through the bullshit and tell you what's actually happening.
To a greater degree.
But I think that's honestly what people think about Fox News and MSNBC as well. They're like, I watch this because I don't want the fake shit from the other side. I want to know what's really going on.
What is Tucker thinking?
Yeah.
So recognizing that's the same exact mental process that is occurring in everybody who I think is dumb, and is also occurring in me. And I think he did a really good job of pointing the finger back at his own audience and being like, "The hell are y'all doing here?" Yeah. It's an interesting question, and I just wrote down. I was like, "Why do I do this? What do I emotionally get out of this that I am not just reading fiction?"
I don't know, but I will say people do not like when you don't know what's happening in the quote unquote news.
Yes.
I was talking to somebody, I forget who, maybe I won't even say. I was talking to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, the fires. How are you with the fires? I was like, what fires? I'm like, California's on fire. Not my part of California. And they were like appalled is the best word I can use to describe it. That I didn't know that somewhere in the state of California, there was a big fire going on.
Yeah.
So I think there is a sense, at least in America.
Well, also, which is funny, I just want to point out that somebody who knows that you live in Los Angeles, who is asking you about fires, that can't tell the difference between Northern and Southern California, is upset with you for not knowing that there's a fire hundreds of miles away.
I guess I could start with, I know why I don't try to watch the news, which was, I just read Tim Ferriss's book where he says a lot of people spend a lot of time and mental energy consuming news and then discussing it with their friends and then doing nothing to change the world. And so if you're the kind of person that is going to use that information to, like, you're like, oh, I didn't know that this tragedy was happening in Rwanda. I'm going to fly to Rwanda and volunteer. Okay, great. Like, if that's how you handle tragedies in the world, then it's very good for you to know what's going on. But if you are going to read them, bitch about them at dinner, and then do nothing about them, Tim's point, which I thought made a lot of sense, is you might as well just read anti-cancer, change your own diet, have more energy to pursue your own projects better.
And maybe even then donate more money to charity if you want it to be effective in the world.
Yeah, sure. But he basically just says most people don't use their knowledge of the quote unquote news to do anything good for themselves or the world. They just get angry and then come together with their tribe to be angry together. And so he opted out and said, I'm just going to not do this. If I'm going to consume something, I want it to be Marcus Aurelius' meditations or something about how to get in better shape or something that's just going to make me better in the long run, because in his opinion, the news doesn't make you better in the long run. Yeah. And that was compelling. So that convinced me. So my reasoning is just his reasoning.
Well, I don't read the news. And to be clear, I'm not going to play the other side, but I know that the response of people is, it does matter that you vote for the president in political activism because you can make a difference and your voice on social media matters. I happen to disagree with all that for subtle reasons, which I'm not going to address here because we've done it in the past and I don't want to deviate too much from this.
I don't know many people that gather news over the course of 4 years and then it sways which political party they vote for. You know, like most
that's one of my criticisms is like, did you really need to invest this much time? Would you have not known which? Well, sorry.
So I should say I'll just to give Tim's argument all of its strengths. He also says the most important stuff will come to you through other people. So you'll know that the U.S. is leaving Afghanistan. You will not be oblivious to the most important things happening in the global news cycle, but you'll skip a bunch of stuff that is less important. And if you decide one is important, sure, I guess you can go out of your way to research it on your own. But he's talking about the daily consumption via a newspaper or a news channel that mostly is either repetition of something that you already heard about or being manipulated in a way to aggravate you or to misrepresent the information, like Astral Codex you're just saying. So it's it's not that there's virtue in knowing nothing except for what's happening in the 1 square mile around you, but that you're going to know most of the big stuff because it'll bubble up to you anyway through all the people who are addicted to consuming the news.
And I think also equally important is that while those short-term news stories perhaps have a higher likelihood of being, very verifiably false, the degree to which you can trust the general opinion of your peers is also suspect. You know what I mean? Like, okay, did we leave Afghanistan? Did we leave on the correct timeline? Did we pull out? Like, literally the verb that you use confers did we retreat from Afghanistan? Confers a judgment on that is implicit. So almost anything that you're hearing from anyone about the world is rife in judgment and bias. But anyways, so I was thinking, like, why do I do this? What do I get out of it?
You're missing the mic like crazy.
Am I missing the mic?
Justin just
Can you hear me here?
Oh, really?
You got me, dude.
I see him over here like this.
What do I say? Yeah, so I was thinking, and you mentioned the social thing. I think there's a big social participation that one gets in the same way that you might watch ESPN to talk about a game. You get to participate socially, and you can gain advantage if you know 2 more things than the other person. Definitely interrupts boredom, which can otherwise you have to deal with the present moment, which is often not fun. Just sinking in, being meditative, which we spoke. Most people, including myself, can't comfortably meditate for like more than 15 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, but certainly not 2 hours. So to have that time and just be like, I will sit still and not consume something or turn something over in my mind. And then I think, it makes me feel certain that I understand things, which I know better that I don't, you know? And I think all of those things probably people can relate to. And so I'm going to continue to try to focus on things that do not require, that are less subject to that bias, which is, I think, philosophy, comedy, fiction. You know what I mean? Like, if I want to go to the news and treat it like, oh, this is about a fake world that nobody actually lives in, which might be totally false and might correspond to the truth, then that would be healthy. But I don't actually think I can address it that way. So yeah, I do think that and many of the fiction books that I've read have had lasting impact on me that I think has been really positive, even though they don't say anything about planet Earth or the people who live in it. I feel
like we, as a society, put a lot of emphasis on understanding the short term of quote unquote what's happening in the world, and then almost no emphasis on understanding longer term history. And so Ray Dalio's whole argument is he is able to be a better investor and know more about where the world is heading because he just understands what's happened in the last 700 years.
700.
And no one else is looking at that. And so I almost wonder if you'd be better off, because history does repeat itself. If you're like, okay, I really want to know what's happening in the world, I'm going to study what has happened through the course of time instead of just being really, really, really well informed on what MSNBC has decided to tell me about what happened yesterday. Yeah,
that's his argument, is that history repeats itself, but not in the span of a human lifetime. So the people will see like seasons only once and then die. So if you're not a student of history, which again is subject to a lot of the same difficulties in getting to the truth, then, well, it could be a problem. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.